One of them was only 17.
And the age of consent is 16.
This is Thomas Hofer.
That is not what happened.
These women feel that you them. They went to look at a room and you.
That is not what happened. It was 8 counts of assault, of which was completely 100% consensual.
He was arrested on 8 counts of assault. Thomas lived in Sydney, Australia, where he worked as a real estate agent. The method with which Thomas lured these women in was shockingly thought out. He often advertised properties on a popular sharehouse website. The nature of his job allowed him to execute his devious plans.
It was October 2014 when Hofer lured his victims to a bar here in Glebe in the city's inner west. On the ruse, they'd be inspecting a room to rent in the neighbourhood.
Whenever a female client showed interest in the house he advertised, he would take them to a bar as a treat and ply them with alcohol. When they were sufficiently drunk, Thomas would then take the unsuspecting victim back to the property for them to check the house. His first victim was a 23-year-old American tourist who reported the case to the police in the morning. That night, Thomas assaulted a 17-year-old girl using the same method.
Surely the fact that you plied the women with alcohol would constitute that they weren't able to give you their consent.
They were not plied with alcohol. They were quite tipsy. They were moderately intoxicated. They were not substantially
They were there to look
intoxicated.
at a room and you.
He was arrested later that day and charged to court. During his trial in 2016, the American lady recounted how he kept buying her alcohol and would remove glasses of water from her hand when she tried to sober up. Thomas was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment. He was paroled after a few years. During a confronting interview, the ex-house agent insisted that he was innocent.
I'm 100% innocent of what happened.
It was unclear what his thinking was, but he maintained that he couldn't have the 17-year-old because the age of consent was 16. He refused to apologize to his victims and denied getting them drunk, claiming they were only slightly intoxicated. He even tried to appeal his conviction, but the High Court of Australia threw the case out. A few weeks after the interview, he reoffended using the same method. His parole was revoked, and he was sent back to jail.
They're traumatised. I mean, one of them contemplated suicide as a result of this.
Well, I attempted suicide in jail because I was unable to prove my innocence.
Thomas Fuller is our first example of a criminal showing no remorse. But wait until you hear about Robert Shelby. This is Robert Shelby. Shelby is in Multnomah County Circuit Court, 2 women. In November 2015, Shelby attacked his first victim, a woman struggling with homelessness. The details of his attack are chilling, to say the least.
Months ago, a jury convicted Shelby for the brutal attacks on 2 women. The first happening just before Christmas 2015. The woman was kidnapped and bitten. The woman only escaping the next morning out of a bathroom window.
The court heard that Shelby the woman, bit and threatened her anytime she made to leave or fight back. In fact, the bite marks were still visible by the time she was able to escape through the bathroom window in the morning. The woman was found on the street by 2 construction workers who stayed with her until the police arrived. She was treated for the beatings, and forensic nurses noted the dental prints on her skin. The police linked Shelby to the crime when he attacked another woman in March 2016. Shelby broke into the home of a pharmacy technician after she refused to open the door for him. Once inside, he pushed the woman, attempted to strangle her, and then assaulted her. When help came for the woman when someone knocked on her door, prompting Shelby to flee the apartment, but not before he had sexually assaulted her for the 3rd time. Through investigations, police were able to match his DNA to the crimes. His attorney, Brett Hall, tried to argue that Shelby's behavior was a result of his chaotic environment. However, Judge Tom Ryan insisted that this isn't an excuse. He was charged with strangulation, kidnapping, burglary, sexual abuse, and unlawful use of a weapon, and sentenced to nearly 70 years in prison. Here is Shelby's attorney trying to make a case for him.
When we look for the reason why we're here today, you don't have to look that far. We know that he grew up in a very chaotic environment.
Throughout the trial and sentencing, Shelby said nothing and didn't show any remorse for the victims that were in the same courtroom with him. If you think Shelby is a monster, it's because you haven't met Keith Phillips. This is Keith Merville Phillips. The unrepentant pedophile was charged with 5 cases, 9 indecent assault charges, and charges of sex. Phillips denied all the charges and insisted that he was innocent, despite the amount of evidence presented. Wait till you hear how Keith defended his actions. The jury found him guilty of almost 70 offenses during his trial. In December 2022, he was sentenced to 28 years in prison, plus an additional year on license whenever he was released. This sentence meant that Phillips would be 82 by the time he would be eligible for parole. The jury heard how he regularly abused the girls because he knew no one would believe them. The deeply traumatized girls recounted how they had suffered psychologically and resorted to drugs to better cope with the trauma. One of the victims called him a monster who ruined her childhood. Phillips didn't show remorse or react as he was handed his sentence, prompting the judge to describe him as one of the evilest defendants he had come across, who had no remorse and was devoid of emotion for his victims. Detective Constable Alison Thompson of the North Yorkshire Police also remarked about Phillips' lack of remorse and praised the victims for speaking up. Another criminal who committed the same crime and showed no remorse is Andrew Burrows. This is 57-year-old Andrew Philip Burrows. Burrows lived in West Woodburn, near Hexham, and was in Carlisle Crown Court for the crimes he committed in Cumbria. He was convicted of 23 offenses, which included 9 charges of and numerous sexual assaults. There was also a charge for brutal mistreatment of a child. The victims told the court how Burrows' actions affected their lives as they read the victim impact statement. One of his female victims told the court that previously she was against the death penalty. However, Burrows' actions have made her reconsider her stance. Another victim recounted suffering from nightmares and flashbacks of the terrible experience to the point of contemplating suicide. Wait till you hear how Burrows reacted to these allegations. Burrows denied all the charges against him, but his attorney, Judith McCullough, noted that he knows the serious nature of the offenses. Ahead of the sentencing, Judge Nicholas Baker considered the victim impact statements and a psychiatric report of the convict. When pronouncing his judgment, Judge Baker noted that Burrows is a destructive offender who poses a risk to the public. He rebuked him for being callous and not showing even the slightest remorse for his crime, and how it ruined several lives. Burrows was sentenced to 24 years in prison and will serve 16 years before he will be eligible for parole. He was also handed a 3-year license period. The unfeeling convict would be 73 by the time he would have a chance at freedom. Like most sex offenders and rapists, remorse is a strange concept, and watch how Teddy Allman maintained that. This is 51-year-old Teddy Albert Allman. The former Edinburgh man was in Bartholomew Circuit Court for 3 felonies, including while compelled by force with a deadly weapon, criminal confinement while armed with a deadly weapon, and intimidation with the use of a deadly weapon. This is when the case got especially strange. The case is unusual because it took 4 years for Allman to stand trial, and because Allman himself made a video and audio recording of the assault, thereby providing evidence that the prosecutors used to nail him. The video, made on September 10, 2018, the day of the attack, showed Allman calling out the date and time in a twisted form of record-keeping. Investigations revealed that during the assault, Allman was armed with a knife. Allman wasn't new to restraining orders. 3 other women already had restraining orders against him. Despite all the evidence, Allman denied the charges, claimed that the victim invited him, and that he neither tied her up nor assaulted her. His insistent denials were not entertained by Judge Kelly Benjamin, who agreed with the 6-man, 6-woman jury that he was guilty and sentenced him to 35 years in prison, with 28 years executed and 7 on probation. He was also handed an extra year to serve concurrently with the main sentence. Throughout the trial, Allman showed no remorse for his crimes. When the judge gave him a chance to address the court, he stated he was being misrepresented. If you thought these criminals showed no remorse, watch this.